Hey friends, welcome to Alternative Homesteading, where we grow food in any space using simple, sustainable systems, right? Sometimes that's hydroponics, sometimes that's aeroponics. I do permaculture, we do mushroom farming, indoor mushroom growing, raised beds, whatever it takes, sprouting, microgreens. Whatever it takes to grow the most amount of food possible in the smallest space. But today I'm going to answer the number one question that I get asked on every single platform I'm on. And if you want to know all the platforms I'm on, make sure to check in the description below and I will have links to all of those. Every one, I share a little bit different content over there. So it's a great way to, if you want to see more sprouting, for example, I tend to share that more on a different platform. And so all of those links will be in the description below. So welcome to my garage. This year, things are changing, as they always do when we evolve in gardening. And I love that when we're talking about alternative homesteading, some of you guys start with a 1-tower garden in your home. And then all of a sudden you tell me you're buying 2, then 3. And then I hear that you're buying a small piece of land and starting a little homestead on a small piece of land, not farms. A lot of us can't afford to live on farms, nor do we want that work that's involved, but just being able to use the space we have, whether it's staying where we are or, deciding that we love this lifestyle and branching out a little bit further into it. It's just really fun to share that journey with you guys. And just so you know, I do have a free community and a Facebook group for customers. So if you've purchased a tower from me before and you're not in that group, shoot me an email. I will put my email below and you can have access to that group. And anytime you use a link, buy one of my courses or use my link to buy a tower garden or harvest wall, you get access to that so that I can help support you on your journey and we can share ideas and learn from each other. All right, so let's dive into the number one question I get asked all the time, and that is, where do we buy seeds? So we're going to talk about seeds in general from an education standpoint, so I can share with you like how you best can make the decision, because I can give you a list of names, and I will give you a list of names, but they might not have something you want. And the things I buy from these companies today, they might not have them available tomorrow or next year. And so I have to go on a hunt for specific plants often. I'm doing that right now because I love that plant, but it's no longer available where I used to get it from, or the cost is too high, or something has changed. So when it comes to seed starting, number one question, organic, where do we find non-GMO seeds? So this is a tricky question because it used to be that to get genetically modified seeds, you had to be a farmer and buy genetically modified seeds. They don't reproduce. And so you had to go specifically buy those for growing GMO crops that you could spray and do all that stuff. That is changing. And so now what we're starting to see are things like the purple tomato. The purple tomato, it is a genetically modified tomato that was mixed with, I'm pretty sure it was a snapdragon, and now you get these purple tomatoes. That is a modified plant. And so there are modified plants out there now. So we do need to be more mindful and just kind of know what we're purchasing. That doesn't mean you have to do organic or non-GMO seeds all the time. It just means know where that plant came from and do a little research on what you're growing so that you understand if it has been altered using CRISPR technology or genetic modification versus a hybrid. So a genetically modified plant, man has gone in and changed the genome manually in that plant. CRISPR technology is when they're like clipping things out and then they can add things back in to change the behavior of the plant. Mustard, for example, mustard greens, for example, if you're buying baby greens in a salad bin, now we know like that baby mustards that are in there and some of the other greens that are in there have been altered using CRISPR technology so that they no longer have spice to them. These are not things that I personally want to put in my body, so we try to avoid those by growing our own food because nowhere is it labeled that they've done that, right? You probably don't even know you're eating those things if you are eating them. So another reason to grow your own greens. Greens specifically, they mess with greens a lot, and greens and herbs are easy to grow and a great way to start saving money really quickly. No idea what that is, but the mountains echo and that is loud. Okay, so now that we know genetically modified and CRISPR, what about hybrids? And so hybrids are different, and a lot of things are going to be hybrids. A hybrid, most everything these days are hybrids, even if they have not been changed and bred And we're talking about breeding two plants with two plants, not modifying them in a lab. But most things today, even plants that are heirloom, are only typically about 50 to 100 years old to be considered heirloom. Now, there are some that are thousands of years old that have never been altered. Acorn wheat, for example, is one that is not been altered or changed over time. And some of these occurrences happen in nature, guys, right? So acorn wheat is one of the original wheat berries, and then it bred with a grass and started to change. And then man started to change them through breeding them with different things. And then we started genetically modifying them. That's the progression there, which is the progression of most foods. So we do need to be aware and understand this process. So hybrids, that's when you take one kind of tomato, let's say a beefsteak tomato that you love, but it isn't resistant to blight, and actually it gets blight super easy, but you've got this other tomato that's actually resistant to blight, and so they breed the blight resistant with the beefsteak. And they try to change the behavior of that plant, and so that it becomes a beefsteak that is also resistant to blight. Okay, so that's hybrid. You're just crossbreeding different things to try and create a new plant. I'm personally totally fine with hybrids. And let me explain why. And there's two different kinds of hybrids that you might want to consider. Because it is the way nature works, right? When I garden in my garden, if I keep my seeds, there is a good chance that the things that are going to come out of those seeds are not going to be true to the original plant. Because my cucumber, if I'm growing six different kinds of cucumbers, they can cross-pollinate. They can cross-pollinate with a zucchini, and I could get something really weird. Cross-pollinate with a pumpkin. Certain things can cross-pollinate, and you don't end up with the same thing that you started with. So there are certain things that I purchase that are hybrids because they grow better and they're more efficient and they give me food. And so I'll talk about a couple of those specifically. One in particular, that's a big deal for our diet. And it's just, if I didn't grow it as a hybrid, I'm going to get very little of it one time a year, where growing this hybrid version allows me to have this food pretty much weekly and year round. And so it's a very important plant to add to our diet. So we get a hybrid of that. So that's what hybrid is. So you may see things like H1 and H2. That means it's a first generation hybrid. They have gotten it. What'll happen with hybrids is they're not stable for a while. And so if you were to cross-pollinate two things intentionally and get something you liked and save those seeds and then cross-pollinated it again, it's no guarantee that every seed is going to give you that plant that you loved. Some could be a little bit different this way. Some could lean towards being different this way. And so it takes a while to stabilize those hybrids so that what your desired outcome is what you get out of those seeds. H2, not super familiar with H2. I just think it means it's been stabilized for a second generation. And I think that makes them more stable than an H1, but honestly, I have no idea. If you do, drop in the comments. But that's what hybrid means in that H1. Open pollinated. Now that's a whole nother topic. Open pollinated means that if I take that hybrid, a lot of times those H1s are not stable. And so if I grow my H1 hybrid plant and I grow a couple of them and I breed them together, there's no guarantee I'm going to get that H1 if it's not open pollinated. Open pollinated hybrids mean that they are stable. If you cross-pollinate two of those plants together and save the seeds, you are going to get the same plant out of those seeds that you started with. And so we call that open pollination. They have the ability to be pollinated and give you the outcome of the original plant, not some random vegetable that might come about from that seed. Now, organic. Okay, when it comes to organic, we're talking about the plant. Like it was grown organically, so it wasn't sprayed with anything. And so the seeds harvested from that plant came from an organic plant that wasn't using synthetic fertilizers, synthetic pesticides, herbicides, things like that. There's some thoughts here. Do your seeds have to be organic? Not really, because we're not spraying the seeds. Even if there's an herbicide or pesticide on that seed or something going on there, that seed, that's not going to get into your food. That would be such a microscopic amount. That seed's going to grow and germinate and turn into a plant. It's more, for my opinion, like organic is kind of that gray zone, in that the original plant, the mother plant, wasn't sprayed with herbicides, chemicals, pesticides, things like that. That, in my opinion, can actually alter the DNA of those plants. And so we're keeping that DNA of that plant that we want more pure by growing it using organic standards so that the seed is then a better quality seed. But again, that's a gray area. Like, I buy a lot of seeds that are not organic because not a lot of seeds are organic. And for cost purposes too, I buy a lot of seeds that are high quality seeds that come from farmers who are using good practices in the way of environmental things and taking care of the plants in an organic manner, but they're not necessarily certified organic because that has an added cost to it, right? And so in the seed journey, you kind of just have to look at what your priorities are and understand plants. And so if genetically modified is an absolute no, then that doesn't mean every seed packet has to say GMO free on it. It just means you need to understand that plant, that company, and make sure it is a hybrid, not a plant that's been modified by man-made lab techniques. Then we have heirloom. So heirloom means that it is original and it hasn't been altered through hybrid, right? Cross-pollinating through just using plants to cross-pollinate to create those hybrids. It hasn't been genetically modified. It hasn't been CRISPR edited. It is how it was back to its original date that plant came to be. That does not mean it's not a hybrid. It's most likely not, it won't be genetically modified or CRISPR technology, but it does not mean it is a true heirloom and that it's never been altered or changed. Heirlooms typically go back about 50 to 100 years. And then there are some that go back a significant time from there. Very rare things. So before we get into the companies that I like, and obviously this is not an exhaustive list. Again, I am looking for certain plants sometimes, and I will branch out of this list to find certain plants. And then if I'm happy with the plant that comes from that company, then I'll continue to buy from them as long as they have that seed available. They do fall out of availability, guys. That is very common. That's why I don't like to give you guys just a direct seed list. I do have one, and I'll put it below that you can download. That typically has really good stuff. These are links and resources that I reference often and I go to pretty much all the time. I buy my seeds from about the same people every single time. But I'm not afraid to branch out from that too if I need to find a particular plant, which I'm going to talk about a couple in today's episode. Just a quick recap, and then we're going to dive into some companies. If it's heirloom, it's typically 50 years or more stable, meaning that plant has not been bred with anything else for 50 or more years. They're not going to be genetically modified or CRISPR'd just because we didn't have that technology 50 years ago, and so they're going to be as they were 50, 100 years ago. Organic, the plant itself, the mother plant, is going to be grown using organic standards, therefore giving us an organic seed. I think there's some criteria to the seeds too, as well as how they process them. I'm not super sure about that, but whatever the standards are, that plant is going to meet those organic standards as a mother plant and as a seed. Again, not 100% necessary, and will limit, if you're only buying organic seeds, you are going to limit yourself to some really cool hybrids that are out there that are not organic, just not because they're not grown well, but because it's very expensive to certify things as organic. Companies often choose not to pay that expense if they don't feel they have to. Hybrids are going to be when man takes plants and puts them together for a specific purpose and allows them to cross-pollinate with intention of an outcome. H1 being a first generation, and open-pollinated, meaning an open-pollinated hybrid, meaning you can then also save those seeds and get the same plant, where with a lot of hybrids that are not open-pollinated, or if they don't state that they're open-pollinated, you need to assume that if you try to regrow that plant from seed through your own garden, you might not get the same thing. You could get something really weird or different out of that plant. CRISPR technology, that is splicing genes out where they splice things back in, genetically modifying. There's some differences in CRISPR versus GMO. I'm not going to get too much into that. To me, both of them are playing God with our food, and I'm not a fan of either one of them. And so I try to avoid those at all costs. And just know a lot of the food at the grocery store, pretty much I would lean towards about 70% is in the genetically modified realm at this point with CRISPR technology at this point. Especially if it's in a package, 100% has modified stuff in it, even fresh made foods like at Whole Foods, they'll even say bioengineered on them. That's that CRISPR technology being put into our food systems. Greens, they don't label this stuff, guys. So if we're not buying organic from the grocery store, we are definitely running the risk of being exposed, of high risk of being exposed to genetically modified foods and CRISPR edited foods. All right, so what companies do I love? So the companies I'm going to talk about a few of them. And these are the ones that I go to. These are kind of my go-tos all the time. So the first is going to be rareseeds.com or Baker Creek Seeds. They are an heirloom seed company. They share heirlooms. That is what they're known for. So they tend to have some that are really, really old in the way that they haven't been touched for hundreds of years, and some not so much. I don't know if they have a standard on how far back they go, actually. I've never actually paid attention to that. But typically 50 to 100 years. And so what's in their catalog is going to be heirloom seeds. Now, there's some controversy, and I started with Baker because there's some controversy here. They made a really poor choice. They put a purple tomato on the front of their beautiful, one of my favorite seed catalogs ever. I get the paid large version every single year. I love to peruse it and be inspired by it. Their packaging is absolutely gorgeous and inspires me. I'm a visual. To me, when food looks delicious, that is how I determine what I grow, guys. There are some things I grow because they're a food source for us that we need. A lot of it comes on what looks tasty to me. This looks amazing. This speaks to my body. It speaks to my taste buds. And their packaging does an incredible job at showing you what the plant should look like, which also helps you to learn as a gardener. Because the second question I get the most often is, what is this plant I'm growing? Because most people are not familiar with how things look in the younger stages or even when things are grown. I've had people send me messages through my community saying, what is this? And it's literally lettuce, but it doesn't look like the grocery store lettuce, right? It looks different than what we're used to seeing at the stores. The stores are very, very limited. The nutrient content's lacking. The taste is not there. And we're missing out on incredible, beautiful colors and antioxidants and taste in our diet with the things at the grocery store. So, love their packaging. So what they did was they put a purple tomato on the front of their catalog. It was very breathtaking. Everybody wanted to grow this purple potato. Come to find out, it actually wasn't an heirloom, or so the story goes. I've never confirmed this myself, so drop in the comments if you have a different version. But the story I have read very briefly is that was actually a genetically modified tomato. It was crossed. I do know, I think they crossed a purple tomato with using Snapdragon, genetically modifying it with something from a Snapdragon that's purple, and that's what made it purple. Again, I didn't spend much time on this topic. I chose forgiveness, and I do pay attention to what I order from them, and the stuff I order from them, I am certain are heirloom varieties. And so if you see something pop up that's new, like a purple tomato, do a little research. It wasn't hard to get to the bottom of this and decide that was not something I wanted to grow. And so I choose Baker Creek, even though there was that controversy around them. Forgiving and moving on. I love them. They have incredible stuff that I'm not willing to give up, that nobody else has done as good as them. And so we're sticking with Baker Creek. And some things you can find in other places, like a large basil leaf. You can get this at many places. But there are some varieties of things, like this Golden Beauty, that I just don't find this stuff. I don't find the varieties of bok choy. I don't find the varieties of Chinese cabbages and bok choys and greens that I love. I just don't see them in other places like I do at Baker Creek. They just have such an incredible selection of greens and things like that. So, Baker Creek, rareseed.com. The second one. This is my second most, I would say all of these seeds, guys, everything I'm talking about are equal in the amount. I probably have the most Baker Creek seeds out of everything. And then my second most used seed company is True Leaf. So True Leaf is where I buy all my bulk seeds. This is parsley pea seeds. They're a pea. I have no idea why I bought so many pea seeds, but we will be using these as microgreens because these are actually not a plant I grow in my tower. I think I thought they were parsley and they're actually a pea. I can feel them. So I buy my seeds in bulk from them. So when I'm heavily seeding my lettuce, which you guys know I love to do, and if you're new here, welcome. Go back and watch some of my other videos. I will take things like this Grand Rapids leaf lettuce, and I will heavily seed my rockwool, and the outcome is a very quickly growing, delicate leaf green on my tower that I can harvest within a few weeks after putting it in there. I do this all the time. I seed start every 2 weeks, and I'm constantly starting the same things over and over and over again, growing them in my baby greens nursery, and then I harvest the whole plant, put the next one in. I have found that's the fastest way to get food to grow on tower gardens, is just that quick turnover versus like cutting it and letting it regrow back. It never grows back with the same vigor. It never grows back with the same flavor, in my opinion, and it's slower. And so having a good seed starting station and starting seeds every 2 weeks allows me to make sure I have greens growing all the time, and we're just seeding a ton of greens. Now, I would typically show you some of the seed starting stuff. Everything's outside right now. We are actually this garage was used for distribution stuff during the hurricane. It's been being used for distribution things because of Hurricane Helene and some tiny homes that we're building, and it just broke. You know, when something doesn't work anymore, and no matter what you try to do to fix it, to make it a space that functions, and it just won't come back together because what your needs are have changed so much. That's what's happened with this space. So actually we are in the process of completely redoing this entire garage. It's going to be amazing. I'll take you along for the journey, but it will be fully enclosed like a home. My husband needs space for work. It'll allow me to have an indoor space for growing, actually indoors. I grow in this garage year round, and it's not the same as growing indoors. I have a lot of temperature issues in here. I have a lot of pest issues in here. So I will be able to grow some food indoors like some of you guys do in your homes, and just have a better way to show an indoor tower where I don't have room in our tiny little cabin right now for that. And then the main, just so you guys know what the future of the channel, I will have my towers and mushrooms indoors, but the majority of my towers will actually be grown full-time outside in a high tunnel to get through the fall and winter seasons, instead of growing in this garage, because this garage will be converted into a fully temperature control like house soon. So super exciting. So True Leaf, this is where I buy bulk seeds, and I buy them by the ounce. 4 ounces is a good amount, guys. This is 4 ounces. It's a lot of seeds. I grow a ton of food. These are going to last you a really long time, but they are lined with metal. And so it's a Mylar bag, and these seal really well. You can see how hard it was to open it. And so these are going to last a long time. So you can purchase these, just put them in a dry, it doesn't matter. They don't need to be in the fridge. Don't put them in the fridge or anything. Just keep them sealed up. Make sure you get that oxygen out of there, and you'll be able to grow a ton of baby greens for at least 2 or 3 years with this. No problem. And so 4 ounces is a good place to start. 4 ounces is a lot of seeds, guys. Just know that. This one right here is a pound. This will actually be, peas make a great, make great microgreens. So I'll probably be turning these into microgreens. I think maybe that's what I even bought these for, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Who knows? Okay, so True Leaf for bulk seeds. I don't buy individual packages from True Leaf. There's nothing on there that's super special to me that I need to buy individual small packages of. But when it comes to bulk, True Leaf has my heart. They are amazing at their bulk supply. I mentioned how you can store your seeds for a long time with True Leaf because they are a Mylar bag that you can reseal. When it comes to Baker Creek seeds, these are envelopes. You've got 2 years, maybe 3 if you're lucky, but use them up in 1 to 2 seasons. They just aren't for long-term storage. Okay, another company, M.I. Gardner, great company, very affordable seeds. Nothing like I would say, oh my gosh, I have to go there to get this. It's pretty, I don't know, basic stuff like your lettuce. Everything here I can get anywhere, but the prices are really good. And so I do like M.I. Gardner. I would say they're the least amount. I buy the least amount from M.I. Gardner. They are not somewhere that I frequently go to because I love their seeds. I'll just kind of pop in sometimes if I'm looking for something that I want to buy a lot of and save money on. That's when I would go to there. Where with Baker Creek, again, back to Baker Creek, here I'm inspired to try new things. I'm inspired to, they just have so many varieties of greens and so many cool things that you just don't see other places. And I'm really inspired by those kind of things. And so that's the difference, kind of necessity versus inspiration and creativity. All right, but Butter Crunch lettuce, for example, love Butter Crunch. I love this one. I grew this a ton. I grow this a ton every year. Why not get it at half the cost? I can get it over at Baker Creek Seed, but Butter Crunch is Butter Crunch, right? And this one costs a lot less. Another seed company I love, and I would say I used to frequent them a lot more than I do now. Now I go there for specific things, and that is Park Leaf Seed Company. Park Leaf gives you these tiny little packages. These are a Mylar bag, so these seeds will last a really long time as well. And they're kind of expensive for what you get, but which is why I don't frequent them for everything. But they have a few things that I really love. Patio baby eggplant, for example. It is a tiny, very prolific bush eggplant. It is my absolute favorite. And the seeds, I can't find them at Baker Creek. I can't find them at True Leaf typically, but they are at Park Seed. And so I will get seeds like that. I tend to go to Park Seeds when I'm looking for bush varieties of things. Smaller, more prolific varieties of eggplant. Peppers that are small and prolific. Tomatoes possibly. Not so much tomatoes here. Celery I've gotten from there. Oh, they have the baby romaine. I really like baby romaine on the tower. I would say right now, the only couple of things that I've been getting from them are the baby romaine and the Patio Pride eggplant. But if I'm placing an order and I got to pay shipping, I typically peruse and find a couple of things extra too. Just know with these Mylar bags, you can use your seeds. Get the oxygen out and then run an iron over the top of this or your food sealer and it will reseal. And so your seeds will definitely last more than 1 to 2 years preserved in these Mylar bags. So they are great at that. All right, 2 companies here. First, Victory Seed Company. Actually, if you buy a tower garden, the seeds that come with your tower garden are in a Mylar bag like this. This is another company that uses Mylar bags. Theirs actually has a Ziploc top, and so you don't have to iron it back down. It is similar to True Leaf in that you can just zip it back up. So again, your seeds are going to stay good longer. Victory Seeds is where Tower Garden gets their seeds from, so you'll notice newer tower gardens come with a seed package that's Mylar with that zip top and that Victory Seed logo in the back. Really great company. I love them. What I get from them specific, and again, anytime I got to go to one place to buy one thing, I will peruse everything just to save on shipping. But the thing that I get from them most is they have the Dwarf Tomato Society on there, and they have a list of all the dwarf tomato societies. There's like a whole society of dwarf tomatoes. And there's a whole community out there. And dwarf tomatoes, again, these are hybrid tomatoes. This is when they're taking one variety and breeding it with another and another and another and so on, trying to get a tomato that is dwarf size. Now, dwarf can mean a lot of things. There are dwarfs that are 4 feet tall. There are dwarfs that are 6 feet tall. There are indeterminate tomatoes that are dwarfs, meaning they will just keep an indeterminate, meaning that there's no end in how many branches and fruits it will produce. It just keeps producing until it gets disease and dies. There's determinate varieties. Those have a set number of bulbs they're going to set, and then they're done and they're going to die back. And so just know, dwarf does not mean dwarf. It can be 4 feet, 5 feet, even 6 feet tall, but they have been bred to be smaller because some tomatoes can be 30 feet tall if you let them keep growing, right? And so that's what dwarf means. They have so many incredible varieties. If you get into the dwarf tomato community, you can go down a rabbit hole. I really enjoy growing some dwarf tomatoes. Again, like so they can come at the cost of production though. If you start to get into growing something that you just really like the way it looks and the fanciness of it and the texture, you might, if you're growing on one tower, just be careful. Know your space, right? If you need a bunch of tomatoes, find something that is for if you're growing on a tower specifically, but if you're growing wherever you're growing, like look at your space. And if you say I have this much space and I need this much food, then it might be better to choose a hybrid that is well known to fighting off disease, producing a prolific amount of tomatoes, and will make it through the whole season. And so you can have an abundance of food. These kind of get into the I have extra space, luxury, really want to try having fun with tomatoes. That's when you kind of branch off into things like this. Now, the other tomato company, and again, most of the stuff at Victory Seed is for tomatoes for me. I do stock some of their seeds for emergency preparedness purposes because of how they're packaged. These are from Totally Tomato. Totally Tomato is a tomato company. They do have other varieties of things in there, so I will peruse and grab some things when I'm shopping there, but I specifically go there for their patio container tomatoes, their hanging basket tomatoes, and their micro dwarf tomatoes. Now, these are going to be tomatoes that are smaller, okay? And they can be indeterminate and determinate too, so read up on them, but they are varieties that would fit in a hanging basket and do really well. They're varieties that fit in pots and grow really well. They're varieties that are micro dwarfs, so they're teeny tiny, but still have flavor and texture. A lot of micro dwarfs have been bred at the expense of taste and texture. Just know that. And so if you're growing micro dwarfs, so you need really small tomatoes, I highly recommend Totally Tomato because you can get hanging basket varieties that you can keep pruned and keep them small and get beautiful, amazing tasting tomatoes that are prolific. Like these produce a lot of food. You can get some micro dwarf varieties that are really tasty from there as well, that aren't just a novelty. Some of these things have been bred just like there's little tiny pepper plants and you get a bunch of peppers, but they're not that great. To little tiny tomato plants that look cute, but they're not that great. Where these tend to be more food-based small varieties. So that's Totally Tomato. Now that leads me to another thing. Did I cover everyone I'm going to? Okay, that's really the only companies I use. Sometimes I will go to Johnny's Seeds because they have Salanova lettuce. Salanova lettuce is a lettuce that grows, it's a head of lettuce, but it has a bunch of baby greens. So where a head of lettuce has so many leaves and they kind of form balls, Salanova produces a ton of leaves that all stay baby leaf size. So you get the benefit of the leaves being mature in flavor, being mature in texture, where sometimes baby greens can be kind of soft and not as hardy as we'd like our greens to be. So you get that maturity in the texture and the flavor of a full-grown lettuce, but it's still a baby green, like the size. they're very expensive. They're very, very expensive. I've stopped growing them for the most part because now I've just fallen in love with other things, and I heavily seed my lettuce most of the time, and I just find that to be better. It's faster for me to grow a bunch of baby greens and just varieties that I really like Crisp Head is a really good iceberg one that I grow a ton of. It's got a great texture versus the Salanova that I'm waiting a longer time for that to mature. The seeds are expensive from Johnny's, but do know I do like the Salanova. I probably will grow it again. They also have the baby romaine there, but Johnny's seeds is more expensive. Shipping's more expensive. So if I do go there, I have to kind of stock up to justify that shipping cost over there. This is a brand that our local health food store, I'm pretty sure, yeah, this is a brand that's local here in Asheville. And so I like to support them occasionally. And these used to be at our natural food grocery store before it went underwater. So I will buy them from there, especially if I'm like, oh my gosh, I seem to always run out of yellow squash seeds every year, something random like that. So if I see something interesting when I'm at the health food store, or when I was in the past, they're actually going to be opening up in a month. Praise Jesus. I will grab from this company, but I've never found anything like so special that I frequent them often. If anything, it's just like a side thought when I'm at the store. Okay, so that's actually it for who I buy seeds from. Like if I'm looking around, oh wait, there's one more. Let me show you. Okay, let me show you this other one I buy seeds. All right, this is another company that I've grown to really love, and it is Pepper Joe's. And so Pepper Joe's specializes in peppers. And I find it really fun when I just love when a store is like, their specialty is one thing, totally tomato. Their specialty is tomatoes. And so they have a huge assortment of rare tomatoes, like hanging baskets, pots, micro dwarfs, things that are going to be very difficult to find in other locations. They've kind of put them all in one place so you can go through and read about them and decide what's best for your family versus like searching 50 different websites that might have one or two micro dwarf tomatoes. Right? So Pepper Joe's is the same. They specialize in peppers. And so I love their peppers. They have some incredible peppers. They grow amazing. And again, I just kind of go to the site and look, do I want smaller pepper plant? I typically, because I grow with hydroponics, I'm looking for small varieties that are prolific, and they grow faster, or they grow consistently throughout the year. So I'm looking for some certain traits. And so Pepper Joe's, really love them for peppers. Now, that is it as far as companies I frequent all the time. The companies I just mentioned, I go to them time and time again. It's typically plays out that I need specific things from specific ones, like the Patio Pride, for example. I haven't replenished those seeds this year, so I'm going to have to go find those. They typically are only at Park Seed, not at Baker Creek or True Leaf. But if I'm in True Leaf and I know I need to buy bulk lettuce seeds, I will go ahead and check for some of those things just to see if I get lucky and can get everything from one spot. I try to get it from one spot. It isn't always possible. So other ways that I shop for seeds. I shared earlier how to know about seeds. And so sometimes you're going to want a particular thing and it's not available at any of the places I just mentioned. That is the case for my hybrid H1 baby cauliflower. Those are hugely important to our diet. They produce about a softball size cauliflower. Even indoors, they're incredible for growing indoors. They're incredible for growing outdoors. Indoors, they can be a little bit smaller if it's cooler, just kind of depends on your environment, but you still get cauliflower. And so I have found that to be the best way to get cauliflower because growing a full head of cauliflower takes so long. It is such a long season and they're beautiful, but they're gigantic. And it's just eating up space on my towers, and my precious space in my garden gets consumed with these plants that sit there for months and months and months. Now, I am going to grow some regular sized cauliflower this year, and you will see those. But I have 13 towers, and so I have the space that I can give to that project. for a few of them. I'll probably only grow like 6. And most of the time I do it because I love it. I love the awe factor of harvesting a huge, giant purple cauliflower for you guys to show you the bounty you can get off of a tower garden. But that's not going to feed my family year round. So I need to be growing these hybrid baby cauliflowers over and over every single, I start the seeds every 3 weeks actually with the cauliflower. And that way we have cauliflower we can harvest over and over and over, summer, spring, winter, fall. And so that requires me finding those seeds. I originally came into contact with this seed in this amazing, I love it so much, cauliflower on Totally Tomato. They were in the catalog and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so brilliant, because they grow in 40 days. Now that's once they get in the tower. There's about 3 to 4 weeks before they even get into the tower, but that's still really, really fast for a cauliflower, 40 days. And so I purchased those, fell in love with them. They work great on the towers. I've grown them outside, inside. They work great on the harvest wall. They are just an incredible, incredible plant to put food on the table. The leaves are super tasty and they're small and they don't take up a bunch of space. Beautiful plant. But to buy the seeds at Totally Tomato, first off, they were out of stock over and over and over again, probably because I mentioned them a lot in my social media. And so I could never find them. And then they're expensive. You only get like 20 seeds. And I'm growing these. I'm starting seeds every 3 weeks. We're going through this plant very fast because it grows fast and I harvest the whole thing and we eat it and we start the process over again. And so I have switched and recently just found them at Urban Farmer, and you can buy them by the ounce on Urban Farmer. And so instead of having to pay $5 for a package of 20, which actually isn't that much for me, and I will say cauliflower is a little tricky to germinate too, so there's some loss there. I'm now buying them at bulk from Urban Farmer, so I can just have access to growing a ton of those. And so I branched away from my favorites, and I specifically looked for that plant, and then I looked for someone who sold it by the ounce instead of by the package, and that is how I found Urban Farmer. Another one. I have no idea who Sherwood seeds are. I have no idea how I found them. The only reason I have these is because I wanted Chinese Merlot cabbage. Purple cabbage. It's a Napa cabbage. And that's what I wanted. And so I went and looked for them until I found a good source. And I found them from Sherwood Seeds. And I got my purple cabbage. There's not even that many in here. So this is a great example of now moving forward, because I have grown these. I grew some already in the past, but I love them. I love Napa cabbages really, really well in my climate on my towers. That doesn't mean it's going to do really well for your climate on your towers, but it does really, really well on my climate, on my towers, and allows me to have cabbages, like firm cabbages, where ball cabbages, traditional cabbage heads, don't do super well in my climate. And then it's like a cauliflower. It takes so much time, so much space that it's not worth the juice isn't worth the squeeze, I guess is the phrase there. And so I tend to stick to the Napas, the Chinese cabbages, the bok choys. I get them fast. I get a ton of them, and I can try and branch out and try cool varieties like this purple Merlot Chinese cabbage. That's it, guys. That is pretty much everything I can share about seeds. When it comes to growing on a tower specifically, if you're here for tower gardening specific, you do not have to, or hydroponic specific, you don't have to have the hydroponic specific things. Look at the characteristics of the plant and line it up with your gardens. If you have a small amount of space, growing things like cauliflower might not be worth it. So go to the hybrid cauliflower. If you have limited space, putting a cherry tomato that's indeterminate, meaning it's going to keep growing and growing and growing on your tower, and you only have a small space and you want a bunch of cherry tomatoes, find a variety that is prolific but smaller, and maybe one that has a shorter season. And then instead of just relying on that one gigantic plant that's going to be hard to manage and make a huge mess, grow 3 throughout the season. And start a couple of seeds and alternate plant your things. And so you've got nice young but prolific producing plants that are easy to manage. These are always the things I'm looking for. Is this plant prolific? Does it have some characteristics that make it extra healthy, like purple with anthocyanins in it? Is it good for my climate, or is this something that's just going to be a nightmare here because it's going to get disease because it's not for my growing region. We need to be looking at these things to make smart decisions. Also, never look at my gardens and plant your gardens according to what I'm planting. I get this mistake a lot on my social media. Someone in Florida is like, I tried this and it doesn't work. And she was trying to follow my schedule. Well, you can't. Florida is very different. Right now, they're at like the peak gardening season in Florida, like their peak. The best time you want to be growing food in Florida is right now, because then it's going to get hot and it's going to be kind of really not fun to grow there, and you're going to have a lot of problems where we haven't even started. Like, I'm just getting my cool weather crops outside and started in our climate. So you need to know your climate. You need to know your environment. You need to know the plants that work best and the times they work best in your area. And a good way to do that, I join Facebook groups. Join some Facebook groups in your area, gardening groups for your region, and see what other people in your area are doing. When it comes to growing inside, if you're growing inside on a hydroponic wall, on a harvest wall, or on a tower garden, be thinking about mostly greens and herbs first off, but be thinking about, is this plant small? Like if you want to grow a tomato, grow a micro dwarf, or grow a hanging basket variety, or grow a pot variety. Cucumbers, same thing. Grow those pot variety cucumbers that don't have to be pollinated, right? Open pollinated things that are able to pollinate themselves. Peppers do really well. Tomatoes are self-pollinating if they have airflow. Cucumbers can get real finicky in the house, guys. Just know that. It may be worth trying. Squash and zucchini too. People have success with them. If you've got the space, you've got the energy to try it, and that's super important to you, go for it. If you don't even bother with that cucumber, right? We can invest in a quality. We can the money we're saving on the lettuce and the herbs and the other things that we can be growing prolifically over and over and over again, like that baby cauliflower. Grow that indoors. Kohlrabi grows amazing indoors. Those kind of things we can grow a lot of and consume a lot of, and then go spend that extra money you're saving from your groceries on a high quality organic cucumber from the grocery store. That's typically my advice. Like, grow the things that are prolific, that are actually going to put food on the table, not cause you a lot of headaches. All right. But again, some people are really good at growing cucumbers indoors. I will be mastering that and sharing how I do it once we get this garage finished out and I can actually grow indoors. I'm so excited. All right, guys, thanks for joining me on this video. I hope it blesses you with knowledge to equip you to be successful in your seed starting journey. One last thought. If you're growing on a tower indoors, turnips do amazing too. So you can go back and look at some of my videos. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys on the next video.